Hey everybody, got an exciting video for you today, and rather than do some recording, I removed myself from the screen today because I want to take a little bit of time to go through a little bit of a presentation, which is rare for me, but I think it's definitely warranted to this because I'm making a very bold statement about a $100,000 mistake that companies make building Canvas apps. And we want to focus in on quality, making quality just essentially number one, or to steal from Ford, quality is job one. And it should be the highest priority for you guys as well. So let's look into some of the claims here and some of the justifications as well as the assumptions so that I can substantiate that bold claim. So let's look at Fortune 500 companies. So this is essentially what the statement or how the statement is geared. It is focused towards Fortune 500 companies. You could be a 1,000 or higher, or even a small company with even just one employee. The point is, you will see significant savings in productivity and raising the quality of your apps by following what I'm about to share here. So let's kind of break and tear this down. So the assumptions are the development team size is between 5 and 8, which is about a standard agile size for a team. And the agile sprint duration also, default out of the box is essentially 2 weeks, and most companies stick to that. And then we have average sprint cycles per delivery of the application. It's usually 3 sprint cycles, so if we've got 2-week durations of that, we're looking at a 6-week lead time to essentially, from the start to finish in delivering an app. And if we look at that over the course of a year, which has 26 weeks, we're looking at about 4 point something, per app. Now we realize that applications come in different sizes, different complexities, so we'll give a range, an average range of about 4 to 8 applications that can be delivered per year. So let's look at, when you're developing an application, what are some of the top 3 efforts that go into building your application? Well, let's hope that planning and requirement gathering is the first thing that you're doing, right? So that should be the number one largest effort, and it should be an ongoing effort. And then also making sure that you do and design the application from the ground up, meaning you've got to get your data, then you got to get the modeling, make sure you've got access and security so that you're building an application that's, accessible as well as secure. And then finally, the third biggest effort, which is the focal point of what I want to share here in this video, is building screens and the associated controls that go along with that. That is the third largest effort. I'm going to show you how to streamline that. So let's talk about the topics that I want to cover in this video, because this video is meant from executive managers all the way down to Power Application beginners, maybe citizen developers, all the way up to your pro devs, okay? So something in this video for everyone. So let's start with an intro, which is kind of where we're at right now. And then we're going to move on into discussing key value pairs and JSON in general, because the Power Platform essentially at its core is all about JSON. If you get into anything, in the, past the beginning stages and get into the intermediary side of things, all the way into the advanced, JSON is just something you absolutely need to wrap your head around. So we want to look at replacing, multiple static variables with a single key value variable. In other words, I see this happen a lot in the code when I'm reviewing developers' code that doesn't seem to get, updated either with a context variable, but they're using global variables. There's a way of packaging this up in a single variable set that can essentially make it nice and tidy and bundle all of this up and remove the plethora of set that you see again and again. So then we want to talk about inefficient custom template approaches. Most people that I talk with and work with, I see them doing it in the inefficient way, okay? Something's better than nothing, but it's still highly inefficient because the developer is still spending more time than they need to customizing all of these controls. And it's just, it's not helpful. And so let me show you kind of the good, a better, and the best way of dealing with that. Essentially, what we want to get to is the most highly efficient template way. And then I'm going to start to show you how to save an application and upload an application so that you can modify this template in a very creative way. Then what we're going to do is we're going to need to learn a little bit about the Power Platform command line interface, specifically called the CLI. We're going to talk about the canvas portion of the CLI. It only has two features that you're going to use it for, is pack and unpack. Now, you can use a zip file to do it, but nonetheless, there are idiosyncrasies that can happen, so it's best to just use the pack and the unpack to make sure that you have consistent results. Next, we want to talk about, after you've downloaded and unpacked it, let's look at the file structure of what's in an MS application, and that essentially is JSON and YAML. Now, we don't have to really deal too much with the YAML, but it is good to at least know that it's there and what it does. And so, without further ado, what we're going to do is now pile into this and start to discuss the JSON. In the description box below, I will have quick, fast links so you can navigate throughout this entire video, so you're not going to be stuck in any one area if you're more advanced. If you're a beginner, you obviously want to stick and watch this thing from beginning to end, and if you're somewhere in between the both, feel free to just kind of click through where you need to be. So I now want to begin with the concept of key value pairs, and we're going to work our way into JSON. So when we're using Power Platform, or specifically a Canvas app in the Power Platform, everything has to do with a property and a value, okay? And so the property is typically, having to do with a widget or an object that we've dragged out on screen. So in this example, this is a text box, and I've got a couple of custom properties too that I've set. So number one, I set the background color different than how it is from the default. So if I go up here to click on label, here's a second label, right? It has no background color and its default text value is just text. So for the one that I have up here, I did a little extra work. I gave it a custom value, so its text is a number. It doesn't have quotes. I can make it a string by putting it in quotes, and now you'll see data type is string, because before, without it, it's just data type is number, okay? And then from there, I also set the property down here, which is the fill. So if I go up or down, rather, to go to the fill area, you'll see that I have this color, which is a RGBA, which stands for red, green, blue, and then, of course, the alpha value. And those values are from 0 to 255. You could also just type in, if you wanted to. I'll copy this to the clipboard, and then I can type in red. Right? So if I type in red, boom, now it's red, right? Okay, so that's ugly. Can't really stand to see it. In any event, but that's how you set these custom properties. Now, all of this is possible through the concept of the property and the value. This is also referred to as name and its value. Okay, so let's go back to here and let's specifically go to back to the text area. So the name and its value, okay? I want you to also think of it in more generic terms. The what is set to, okay? So the what are we talking about? The text, the tab index, the visible, the width. The what is set to, okay? So name value. So now that you have that kind of beat into your head, if you've been doing patch statements in here, so this is more along the lines of somebody who is using Power Apps, and I would say once you get towards the tail end of a beginner, you start having to write and read and get data from data sources, and eventually you have to write values back to the database. Once you hit that, you start crossing the precipice or the threshold from being kind of a beginner developer into what I would call more of an intermediary. Once you start getting into full CRUD operation, at that point you're pretty much a average or a normal Canvas app developer. If you do not know how to write patch statements, then this entire video is probably going to be above your head. I'll do my best to break it down, but know that you really need to understand some of the basics and be towards the intermediary to get a lot of this, because if you can't even wrap your head around a patch statement, you're going to struggle probably a lot from here on out. All right, so let's look at this patch statement a little bit closer. So a patch is a function essentially, and it takes two parameters. The first parameter, it needs to know what the data source is, and then the second parameter says within that data source, what am I going to update? Now, defaults is another function, so it's called a nested function because it's inside of the patch statement. In other words, patch is a function and defaults is a function. Defaults only takes one parameter, and it needs to know what is the data source. And for those of you that are very new, defaults is the function that you use when you're writing a new record to the database. Otherwise, you would have to provide the very specific record within the data set that you want to essentially update, okay? And so in this example, I'm creating, because I'm using defaults, I'm writing a new record, and I'm writing a new record with item 1 and its value, item 2 and its value, and this one happens to be a string value. This one so happens to be a number value, okay? So just know that that's what it is. And the curly braces signifies essentially some JSON. It's also referred to as key value. It may also be referred to as a dictionary, depending on the programming language you're experiencing and things of that nature. But just know that data inside of curly braces typically is a good sign that you're running into some sort of JSON. To understand JSON a little bit further, let's look at it this way. So we have our opening and closing curly braces. Actually, we can get rid of this off the screen. And this is just a title, so just to keep things simple and only having on screen what you need to know. Let's look at this a little bit closer. So the curly braces begin and end around the entire structure. And then all it is a series of keys and values, okay? These I just left here. This can get confusing, especially for newbies, because they see the word key and the word value and they're like, wait a minute. So in this context, the key is the key and it's also the value. But again, the what and its value. So I don't want you to think of key value or name value because that sometimes can mess people's heads up. Just understand that you have two things that you need to provide. The what and what is it set to. The what and what is it set to. Again, the left side of this colon is the what, and what is its value or what is it set to is on the right. So all you really need to know is that key value refers to a left and a right position separated by a colon. To the left of the colon is the what we're referring to, and to the right of that colon is what is the value that we're assigning to it. Okay, so maybe that's a better way of trying to wrap your head around it. So these are just more examples. We got a string, we've got a number. This one's a Boolean value because it's true. You can also use 0 and 1. You can also use true and false. You can also use yes, no. Those are other examples of Boolean ways of doing things. Now, for item 4 and item 5, both have to do with colors, but the way that I've got color here and the way I've got RGBA, this is a proprietary value for the Power Platform, specifically Canvas apps. It's part of the FX language, and it's how you specify a data type of color. Now, color actually is a data type amongst other data types in the Power Platform, but this is how you can provide values proprietary to the Canvas application. It can actually be a data type color. Now this is where things start to get a little bit squirrely and blow up your mind. Let's come back to 6. Let's do something more easy like item 7, okay? So the value for the item, or to the right of the colon, right? What is it set to? Sometimes, in some cases, you can have multiple values that could be there, right? In this example, we have a list of potential or popular values. And you may be thinking, well, how or where could this be used, or how might that be used in a Power App? If we look at this drop-down, we see that the values, or the items for the drop-down, essentially all it is a list of values. Okay, so we got value 1, value 2, value 3, and if I were to go up here and just copy this out, I can do and duplicate this again and just put a comma and put value 3, let's make that 4, and now this is live, right? I'm holding the Alt key down so I don't have to run the app, but now that extra item in there is because I added an item to the list. Okay, so that's how you use a list. So the what is the items on this particular control, and the control needs to show a list of items. Essentially, what this is right here, this is looked at as a table, okay? It's a table with a singular column with multiple values in it, okay? So if I had multiple columns, I may have to, in some cases, now this is really, really advanced, and I want you to mostly ignore this if you're new, because this might blow your mind. But if you were to have a table, or you wanted to use a table somewhere, I don't know, a collection or coming back from a database or something, and it had multiple columns, you will need to specify one column to use here. And so for the items, you would do, the table name dot, and then because I don't have any other columns other than just the intrinsic or internal rather column name, I would just use the value. But if I had a named column, I would use whatever the name of the column is, and it would show up in the IntelliSense, right? Because it would read the columns in your table. So just know that you may have to do that if your table has more than one column. But essentially, all I wanted to show you was that in this instance, we have a control that needs a list of values. And so that's why we have this like this. All right, now for the more complex one, or the complex item. Okay, this is item number 6. And so you'll see another nested set of curly braces. And I appropriately named it here so that at least it would maybe contextually make some more sense. So basically what I have inside of the curly braces is the same thing that I have on the outside. I have a list of key value pairs or name value pairs or items. What is it and what is it set to? And a list of them essentially, because I've got value 1, value 2, value 3, and this is a sub item 1, 2, and 3 of its parent, which is item number 6. You'll see this in data more referred to, like maybe this entire object has to do with a user, right? And so this might be the name, the first name, the last name, the sex or gender, its social security number, its height, its weight, and then down here might be address. And then this might be street, city, state, and you could keep packing it on. But all of that is contained in an address item, all part of one singular user record. Okay, so that would be a good use case of maybe how and or why we would use this. So this is essentially JSON in a nutshell. Now I'll link to another video in case what I just said makes no sense to you. Sometimes seeing things multiple times, multiple ways from different people explaining it, it kind of, makes it gel a little bit better. So I'll put a link to a description box, in the description box below, to another video, specifically a 10-minute down and dirty course on JSON. All right, so that being said, this is the JSON that I wanted to show you here. Now, in the next set of videos, what I wanted to do is I want to show you about variables and how to clean up the variables. So now let's talk about variables and specifically the onStart property for the application itself. This is a very popular place that people will throw up or throw in a lot of variables and stack and pack them like you see that I have here. And there's a bunch of set, right? And they're all kind of listed in sequence. And in this particular instance, all of these are going to run sequentially. By the way, this is kind of a very bad way of doing it because, well, number one, there's a lot of them, but more importantly, programmatically, it has to set this value. Then when that's done, it'll set this value. And then when that's done, it'll set this value, so on and so forth, till it gets to the bottom of the list. There is another function called concurrent that if I wrap all of this around a concurrent, all of these will fire off essentially at the same time. And then essentially all I have to do is replace all of that with this, and this will give you a tremendous what is going on here? Let's see here. Current, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, that's right. No closing comma. All right. So this is a tremendous gain in efficiency because what happens is all of these run at the same time. They're not running one after the other. They all run in basically one huge batch. So if you're not using concurrent and you want to use this method, then go ahead and do that. Another way of doing that, and I'm going to remove these concurrencies here. I'm going to leave that like it was. We can leave this. Let's replace all my values that I had before. All right, so this is the sequential way. I'm going to show you another way of doing this. This is using the JSON that we did previously, okay? Now, there's something pretty interesting about this. I have one variable now. I'm doing one set, okay? And I'm using the technique where I'm saying, look what I've got going on here. My var1, so it's a color value of blue. My var2 is a color value of red. So the first three of these can be grouped together logically under something called a color value. And so what I did is in its key value pair, or the what and what is it set to, I did color value. And then I have value 1, value 2, value 3, and I'm assigning blue, red, and purple to each of them, right? So the way that I would use this is I would specify global value dot color value dot value 1 if I wanted blue, or value 3 if I wanted purple. And now I have set small filter. Its value is 5, and I can set large filter is 25. So I created a category called filter sizes, and I just gave it 2 additional objects called small and large. So essentially this is the same as all of that. And so if I leave it like this, now I don't have to worry about the concurrency because I'm setting one value and all of it's being set in and of itself because it's one object. And now it gives me a nice, easy, structured way to set. I would use this approach in this strategy when you are trying to use static variables. For example, if I wanted to do a toggle, so if I did set and I did something like is, I don't know, is filtered, right? And so at that point, I've got something called is filtered, and I want to essentially toggle this guy. And I'll set this to true. No, actually, we'll set the default to false, right? So there is a singular set, which is good because I may want to, at some point, reset it or update it or change its value. Trying to change its value in this is possible with a patch statement, but not the way that I've got it structured. If you go to the documentation on how to patch this type of variable, it works when you don't have nested dictionaries or nested key values. The patch does work on a singular level. So if I just did key value, multiple key values under var global, everything would be fine. But just know that, anyway, use this strategy, or the key takeaway is use this strategy for what's called constants or static values that aren't really going to change in your app. You're going to see this later as we work and relate to theming out not only the template for the look and the feel, but also for setting controls with static values that can be overridden later, but for the most part, they're not going to change. They're going to be the way that they're going to be in the app, and that's how you're going to want it, okay? So just know that it's okay to do this when you need to update whatever the said variable is, because it's much easier to run an update on this. And honestly, the question is, do you need a global variable, or can it be a context variable, which is in scope to essentially the screen or to a function or to, a component or something. So in any event, just the main takeaway was I wanted to show you this. Now let's show you how to use it. Okay, so I verbally gave you that earlier, but here, actually I need to run my application on start so that I get all my values. And this time I want to do var global. And remember, at this point I want to get the value of, let's see what we got here. Here's our 2 categories, color value. And what do I want? I want the color value for number 2. So there's red. I want the color value for 3, or I may want the color value for 1. Okay? And if I didn't want a color value, I can go and get those Boolean sizes that I've got. And here's a large filter, and that's a number of 25. And my other option was small. So the nice thing about this is you'll know that all of your global variables are stacked in a nice, neat, concise order, and they're broken into scope by what you want to do. Like here's a scope of color values, here's a scope of filter sizes, and so you can nice and organize this, and it becomes a great standardization, a lot easier for your developers to figure out what's going on. And as you work across a fleet of developers on the team, if it becomes part of your development standards, everybody knows what to expect. So bake something like this into your standards. It's really, really helpful to understand kind of what's going on. And we're talking about essentially baking this into a corporate template that you can use and move things forward in your organization. So definitely consider this as part of your strategy. That's it for this section. We'll see you in the next one. Okay, now what we want to do is work through the varying degrees of inefficiencies as it comes to custom templating, your Power App. So essentially we're working on a base core application, and so if you have 0 practices at all, right, then what you're doing is you're coming in here and you're adding a button, and now after I've added the button, I want to change it to button, maybe my button, right? So I have to change the text to my button. Now what I need to do is essentially change the color. Maybe I want to change it to orange. And I don't like the rounded corners, so then I'll go ahead and I'll change this to 0. And let's see, what else am I going to do here? Let's do some hover color. So let's make the hover color, we don't want to use that. Let's make it beige. And let's change the hover color text. Let's see, hover color. Actually, hover color is the color of the text. So let's do black. Whoops. Do black. And let's do the fill color, hover fill color. We'll set that one to beige. Okay, so let's press the Alt key and see what we get. Okay, I got a border. I don't want the border on it, so here's the border color. Let's set that to 0. Okay, so there we go. All right, awesome. Now let's go ahead and add another. We can go ahead and, I guess we could do one of two things. If we wanted another button, we could go to button, and we see that we get this default button again, and now we got to reapply all of the settings. And there's no, in Word or PowerPoint, when you're in those types of things, you can copy the styles and then paste the styles. Well, you can't do that here. So at best, what you can do is copy and paste this button, right? So now I've got this button 3_1, which you need to go in and use good naming conventions. So btn underscore or even dash my button, right? So there's another copy of that. So now I've got the same effect on both of these, so that's good. Now what happens if I've got 12 different screens and I've got maybe 16 buttons in those 12 screens? In order for me to change the button style for my application, I have got to go into each and every one of these buttons and change that, and that gets kind of crazy. So let's look at another instance of this. At this point, we're at the worst of the worst case scenarios, right? So this is like the worst way of doing it. The second best or second worst way is you may create an item called master controls, okay? And so in the master controls area, what you'll do is you've got this master button. So instead of copying and pasting from the screen, because this is a template, right? And so this is going to be used by all kinds of developers across one or more teams to create your Power Apps. So you may come up with this ingenious idea of let's have an internal screen that will never be in the menu system, but will only be available for Power Apps developers because they're in the make.com experience. And if we don't link to this screen, nobody will ever see it. And so now we can take this master button and copy it out of here, and we can paste it on the screen here, and then we can just do the my button idea here. So that's another way. But again, same problem occurs when you wind up having 12 different screens, 16 different buttons. Now if I need to update all of that, we've got to go and update the properties on all 16 objects. So then what to do with that? Well, then maybe you may have somebody creative and they say, let's not just create a master control screen. Let's create a master control so that we can take and override essentially the default styles and apply our own. And then after we've applied our own, let's have a parent control that essentially is set to point to the master button on the master controls page, and we can set all those properties. And so what we'll do is we'll come to the parent controls screen, and we'll copy out all of these objects onto our screen, so that in the event that we ever change the master button from, say, orange to this, I don't know, we'll do black, then at least on the screen where we have that parent button, then all of a sudden everything changed all at the same time. But this will require you to have two screens. So first, the master controls page will be used to override the default out-of-the-box power settings. And just in case you didn't know, under Home there is this theme where you can change themes to coral, which would have an orange button, or red. You know, if we change it to red, it changes the background color, but notice the default state of the button. It comes out red. But it doesn't have your company's, you know, look and feel and flair and everything else like that. And besides, the button's still rounded. We use square corners. We don't use round buttons. And so, you know, this is kind of a problem. And so the only way around that, at least for most companies, the way that they're doing it, is they go ahead and they create this master control. But they may be missing this intermediary piece where they actually make a parent controls page that refers to the master button, so that they can copy and paste that to the different screens, so that when they go ahead and they remaster the new master button, everything down screen populates and inherits from that. So it's one change in one place, one fell swoop, boom, everything gets done, right? So that's the best scenario of the worst case scenario. But what I want to show you in this video is, why don't we just create our own custom theme? And how about when we click the insert button, everything that we already have on our master button, which is the one over here, and let me set it back to the orange that I have. I want to just click, you know, button and go button, 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 and I want all of my buttons to come out like this, because I don't want to keep all these screens. I just want to use what's up in the ribbon. And here's another detrimental part to using this approach with the screens. If you get into the habit of doing this with the screens, your developers will not use the ribbon objects for the widgets, because they're going to need to use the predefined or pre-styled widgets. And as Microsoft comes out with new features and new items, because they're already trained to not use this, this is going to stifle innovation in your company, because people aren't going to know what's available to them, because they've got their heads down. They're trying to do their work. They're trying to adhere to the company's standards, and the company's standards requires them to go into this parent control page to grab an object and no longer grab the object up here. So that is a really, really bad approach still, but again, it's the best of the worst case scenario. The ideal one is the one that we're going to show you next. So this is just a quick segment in this video series, and I wanted to show you the Power Platform command line interface. I've referred to this in several of my videos before. I will include a link in the description box below this video to this page. What you want to do is you want to install the Microsoft Power Platform CLI. They do have a Visual Studio Code plugin. It's relatively new. It's sort of kind of in preview. I had a comment from one of my subscribers that watched the video to the other video saying that they had an issue or a problem, and my solution to them was just go ahead and download the Power Platform CLI, which is the standalone, not the plugin for Visual Studio, only because the Power Platform extension for VS Code is in public preview, and it works on both Windows 10 and Mac OS. So maybe it has a different outcome on Mac OS. I believe this user that made the comment was on Windows. So my suggestion is, and what I'm going to show in this video, is the standalone Power Platform CLI. The reason for that is because you can write PowerShell scripts and you can do other scripting automation, and with the CLI installed, it's much easier and more accessible, even though it may be convenient to do it in code. But I'll let you determine what you want to do. I'm going to stick with the standalone Power Platform CLI for this video. Okay, in the next video, I'm going to show you how to use this tool and how to get into getting you the desired results that you need to maximize your dollar value for your company. So to begin off your template, what you need to do is essentially start with a blank template, and then you'll download it, and then we'll edit it. So to get started, what we'll have to do is create a shell of a Power App. Okay, so let's go under Apps. We need to go create a new app, Canvas app. I'm going to pop in this name called My Company Theme App. I'll do it as a tablet, and I'll hit Create. What will happen is, as you expect, I get a blank Canvas app. Now at this point, what I want to do is immediately go to File, Save As, and I want to do it to this computer. And then I want to download this file, which is a MS app. So if I go over here into my downloads, got it on the other screen here. Okay. You will see that the file that was downloaded is this My Company Theme app. Okay. So the next thing that I need to do, and of course it's on the other screen again, let me move it over, is pop open a command line interface. So now what I need to do is get into my downloads directory. So I'll go ahead and change cd dow, and I'll hit tab, dir. Okay, great. Now I have the access to the file that I need to do. And now what I'm going to do is I am going to put into here a command from pack, which is the command line, Power Platform command line, or CLI, that I talked about in my previous section here. And if I just type in pack, you will see that I'll automatically get some help. So let me clear that again, and I'll just do pack. So what you'll do is you'll see of all of the different usages. And today we're going to use the usage for Canvas. So if I do pack Canvas, you'll see that I have only two options to run. I have a pack and an unpack. So if I do Canvas unpack, now I have to specify some values that it says. I got to provide sources and the MS app file. So I'm going to do -- MS app, and because it's in the current working directory, I'm going to simply just tab over one time, but I am going to go back and I'm going to put a period and a / to signify this current working directory. And the reason for that is because if you look at my the place where my command line is, I am in the downloads directory right where this is. So using that period / will be extremely helpful for that. And I'll also do a -- sources, which they use the same switches for packing and unpacking. In one context, it makes sense, especially when you're trying to pack something up. But when you're trying to unpack something, sources, I don't know, it just seems weird. Just know that you need to use sources anyway. So I'm going to use the, again, period / and I'm just going to use the, let's pick out the name of this, and we'll paste it in here. All right, so essentially what I'm doing is I'm unpacking the Microsoft application file, and I'm specifying that I want to put it into the same directory, but in a folder. And that's the period / for the same folder. But I want to put it in a subfolder, or create a new subfolder called mycompanytheme.app. Now, again, the naming conventions, you call stuff whatever you want. Anyway, you go ahead and you run this, and what it'll do is it'll essentially unzip the file. All right, so let me show you something real quick. Control V, so now I have a copy of this, right? And I'm going to take the file extension and I'm going to remove it, and I'm going to put just zip. Okay, and Windows is going to complain that, hey, do you really want to do this? So now that I've got a zip file, I can open this up and edit this and do whatever I need to do. Okay, so I did do that earlier. I'm like, well, why do I need to use the command line interface for this? Seems kind of ridiculous. I can just zip and unzip something, and then I'll just rename the extensions like you just saw me do. What happened was I made extensive modifications, and for some reason when I went to try to upload it, there was some metadata or something missing in it. So here's the key core takeaway. Don't do it. Just use the command line interface as I just showed you how to use, because even though the MS app file technically is a zip file, if all you need to do is unpack it and you're never going to change it and you're never going to modify it, then that's fine. Like maybe you just want to take it, extract it, and put it in source control, and you're never going to pack it up again. Okay, maybe that's okay, but the chances of you might needing to package it up again in the future because I wasn't able to actually pack it and I wasn't actually able to upload it. Something, either I did something wrong or screwy, but I'm always going to err on the side of caution. Why create trouble where trouble's not needed? So just use the command line interface, and if you do it, then like me, I've not had a problem in using it. So that being said, let's go ahead and explore the inside of this file in the next video. So if we look a little bit closer and go back to the documentation, if we dig into the Canvas section of the CLI reference, so we're down here in Canvas, you will see that there is a folder structure here, and it's a good, I guess, light, terse description of kind of really what's in here. And specifically as it relates to what we're doing here, it doesn't provide a whole lot of details past that. So let me go and show you inside of the file, inside of the source. Specifically what we're going to be doing is working in the themes.json for the majority of this course. We will also go into the app.fx.yaml file, and so if we look into it right now, we can see there's really not much information in there, but we're going to be able to access the onStart property and all of that JSON that I was showing you earlier. I'll show you a unique way of kind of how to tie all of this stuff together, or something that you might want to do in order to make things more accessible. All right. So let's dig into this theme.json file and let's go look at some stuff. So I'm going to come over here to where it says palette, and I'm going to collapse that up. And then right underneath it, there's styles. I'm going to collapse that, because palette and styles is the majority of the objects underneath the custom themes object that essentially has all of the meat and the potatoes here. So if we just look at this at its high level, current theme is default theme, and the custom themes is the only one that's listed. It's the default theme. And so essentially this is what we're doing. We're creating a custom theme. The goal here is when we check out widgets from the toolbar, all of that stylization that we showed you earlier, we just want it to be baked into, the Power App application. And so where the Power Apps application gets all of its defaults for what it's doing is under this palette and under the styles. Now, the palette is essentially just a collection of information that gives you details, mostly about colors. So most people get really lost in their brain when they look at this type of JSON, especially newbie or new folks. So one of the things that I've done for you guys is I've taken the JSON file and I've put it into this nice handy little compact spreadsheet. Now you can't really do anything with it other than just digest the information. And so that's really what the purpose of this was. So if we look at this, we can see that there's 3 or 4 areas, and the name, the type, the value, and then its phone value. So this is the palette, okay? So this is the screen background color. Its default value is white. Now you could set this to blue, you could set this to gray, you could set this to an RGBA value, you could do a color fade variation of this, you could set it to anything that you want. All right, so remember I told you that I was going to say, we will be working with selectively this app.fx.yaml, okay? And so the reason we're going to work with this is so that we can access the onStart property for the default for the template. And then by doing so, what we can do is create a bunch of variables. Remember that variable syntax that I showed you earlier, where we're going to create the key, the value, and things of that nature. And I think at one point we did this set global variable, right? And so I did, var global color value. Well, we're going to do something like that, similar for onStart. And the reason that we're going to do that is because when we get into, sorry for flipping around here, the reason for that is what's going to happen is instead of using these RGBA values or the white value or color fade value or whatever, we can put a variable that will assign to our onStart application. That means that while we're overriding the default nature and value of it, we can still make it assignable via a variable that we use in application onStart, so that other developers that maybe are not as savvy of breaking apart an application MS app file or know how to do what I'm showing here, they can simply change out certain aspects of it. A great use case of this may be you're a Fortune 500 company, but each of the divisions that you create applications for has a slightly different color, theme, look, and feel, and you still want to adhere to the same fonts, the same text box sizes, the borders, the no borders, things of that nature, right? All of those minuscule, tedious details is the same, but the only thing that does change is maybe the color values. So some of these color values, like primary color 1, primary color 2, primary color 3, you could or should set these to a variable that you can assign in the application on start. And so we can show you an example of all of that. Then in addition to that, you have what's called the styles. Now this has to do with pretty much everything that you've got inside of the Power application to about a degree of 90, I don't know, I'm going to guess here, guys, so don't hold me. I know this is going to be wrong, but upwards of 95, 98-ish%, somewhere in that range. Everything that you can control in the app can be controlled in here, and even if a property isn't listed, you can still use the user interface to come over here to, let's just say I'll insert a button on screen, okay? And so these are all of the properties. So if set radius top right wasn't available, just cut that out, and then you can go in and you can add another row, another property row in the JSON file to add that, and then assign whatever value or variable to that value that you so choose. So even if it's not listed here, you can still get to it. But wanted to show you for the button, if we come down here, these are all the labels. Actually, what we need to do is let's go over here to view, and we want to freeze the top row. That way we can still see, what we're dealing with here. Okay, so that being said, this is the control template name, label. We don't want that. What we want is button, and we want the default for the button. So keep scrolling, radio, maybe we passed it. Toggle switch, label. I know it's here somewhere. Give me a second. Scrolling away. Button, here we are. Default button style. Okay, awesome. So this is what we're going to work with. And so where's that radius one? Radius top right. So I think that's what I had here, right? So let me just put this over here. Radius top right, radius top right. Okay, so that value is over here. And so its value is set to 10. And so we could change that out if we wanted to, right? But we don't change it in the Excel file. So we're going to have to go over into the actual file and work in the JSON. So use something like Visual Studio Code. I'm using Notepad++, and you can use whatever you want. So one of the nice things I like that I can do in Notepad++ is I can do Control F for find, and then I'll type in the word button over here, and I'll do find all in current document. And now I kind of get a list of every occurrence of button. So I know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for this default button style. So now if I come to here, I can now collapse this down because I've got the actual control name, button, and all of its properties. So its color, the property fill, and all of the stuff that we were adjusting before, I can adjust here. So let me go ahead and go back into the Canvas app, and let's restyle all of this, and you'll see how tedious this is. And so if a developer has to restylize every single component each and every time to adhere to company standards, you can see how painstakingly, how long this process is going to take. It's very monotonous. And the more standardization you have, the longer it takes to develop your applications. And the more monotonous it comes. And the more monotonous it is, the higher the chance for bugs and things to get missed. So that leads to a major quality control issue in your organization. And this fixes all of these problems in one fell swoop. So before we chose orange. So I don't know what that orange is. So let's go to fill because I just changed the fill. Let's see what that looks like. So where is my fill color? Here, fill. So it's an RGBA value. All right, so I'm going to grab this RGBA value out. Right now it is using its own internal reference. It's referring to the primary color, right? So the primary color. So if this was in fact the way that you were going to set this up. Rather than me change this here, what I should do is I should go all the way up to the top of the file, and under the palette, I should look for the primary color 1, and I should change the RGBA value here, because then that would affect the button. As a matter of fact, we could do it one of two ways. So this is the top reference one. So this is the primary color 1, right? So this is having to do with all things. And so if this is your corporate style guide or your corporate theme, then you are going to want to definitely do it this way because you want your corporate colors in here. And so I would go as far as changing it that way. So you know what? Let's go ahead and change it out. So I'm going to do the primary color. We're going to use that orange as the corporate primary color, okay? So now my button will take on that control. But let me do that finding current document again, because there's other stuff that we need to make sure that we're changing. So default button style. So we're back to here again. In fact, I may just minimize this so that I'm have the ability to go back and forth. Let's see. Let's go back to the app. What else are we going to do? We want to take the border radius and take it from 10 down to 0. So let's look for the border radius. Okay, here's all the radius settings. And so it has to do with each and every corner. So we're just going to 0 these all out. All right, so that's done. Let's go ahead and save the file just to be safe. And now let's see what else we're going to change. So we've got that changed. Let's change it here too so that we're being consistent. All right, so 0 there. So this is, let me do the hover effect. So it's blue. We don't want blue. Let's use the beige and we'll set the button text color to black. So let's click on this again, and hover color, we're going to do this beige color we said we were going to do. So let's do hover color. So the hover color has to do with the color of the text. So we're going to do hover color here. Okay, hover color is for the text. So if we set this to black, and we do the Alt button, okay, we're getting that done. Now we do the hover color fill. We'll change that to beige. Now if we hover, okay, we are getting the desired effect. So let's go ahead and change these out. So let's go look at the file and look at hover color. Hover border. Somehow I missed it. Let's go back up. Border radius, hover fill. All right, so we do know that we want to change that here. Okay, so this is where now we can make a change. So it's also referring to the palette. So this is a hover button background color. All right, so we can set this here or we can change it in the palette. Okay, so at this particular point, I want to show you what it's like to change it here. So at this point, we're going to do hover fill. What did I choose? So it was beige, and what did we do for hover color? We just toed back. Okay, so hover color. So we're going to do it here. So that should be black, and hover border, hover fill. What other hover stuff do we have here? Hover border color, border style, border thickness. Let's change this to 0. We don't want to border at all. So we'll do that over here. We got the border radius, border. Let's set that to 0 because this is for border, right? All right, so now we've got a stylized button. Okay, so we've got it the way that we want it. So that looks good. So I think now we've achieved the goal here of that. So now let's go ahead and save this theme.json file. Let's go and minimize. Actually, we need a command prompt because now what we need to do is pack this up again. So let me bring this back over here. And let's change back into the downloads directory. And let me go grab my text so I don't have to pack this all out again. Oh, actually, I need to change. All right, so when you're flipping this from packing to unpack, you just have to change this variable, okay? So this should pack everything back up. Now you will get a checksum mismatch error, and that's normal because it indicates the source has been edited since it was unpacked, and that's exactly what you just did. So the warning is justified and non-concerning because, well, you intentionally did all of this. All right, so with that being said, if we go into the file and we go up to the downloads and we look at this, let's see, it is 11:34 a.m. and this is 11:34 a.m. So I do know that I've got the latest and greatest changes. And so now if I come over here to my Canvas app and I do File and I'm going to File Open, I browse the file, I can come up here and choose that new MS app. Okay, so I don't want to save what I'm currently working on. We'll just go ahead and trash that. So with any luck, this thing will load up, and now that I've got all of the changes baked into my custom theme, I should now just be able to come up here to Insert and click the button, and the button should have all of that work done for me. There's no copying and pasting, there's no master controls, there's no master or reference of anything. I click the button and here it comes out with all of the styles that I want. When I do the hover effect, I'm getting everything. So you do this for each and every control. So if I go back over here, you can see this is the button. This is for the cancel. This is the reservation. This is the inline chart, the pie chart, the bar chart, the legend, video play, a timer, triangle, pentagon. There's a date picker. There's all this stuff that's in here, the different icons and a barcode scanner. Anything that can be stylized is available here, and even if you don't see the property that you need to set, I showed you, all you have to do is go into an object, go into the property list, find it, copy it out so you get the exact spelling of that property, and then just add it into the JSON file. Because the way that you do that is all you do is you simply copy and paste this block of code, and then you replace out this property name with the one that you just copied out of the interface, and then you set its value to whatever you need it to do here. So that all being said, let's go ahead and do something a little bit different now, because I told you I wanted to show you how to set this up for a variable. So let's go back into our Power App, Canvas Power App, because now we have a button on the screen that matches our template, right? So all that's well and good, but let's go to the app. Let's do the start screen, which is by default, and change that to on start, because now what we're going to do is we're going to do set. We're making a global variable, and we're going to use that dictionary trick that we talked about or showed you earlier. And so we're going to start setting some property names. So let's just say we want to change, we'll call this one button, right? So this has to do with all of the button defaults. So we'll do button defaults, and then we'll do the colon. So this is going to serve as our category name. This, from here on out, I'm going to nest in another dictionary list. And so this one I'm going to call fill, and I'm going to put a value in there in a minute. And then the next one I want to do border radius. Now, I'm going to only do one border radius, and I'm going to refer back to this so that essentially all four corners are going to pick up on this. If I wanted to do top right, top left, and whatever, I'd have to create a variable for each of those so that I can consume it. But in this particular use case, for my corporate style standards, I'm going to cheat and use a shortcut and use one single variable for that. I don't know what the RGBA value of the button was, so let me go ahead and pop in a button. Let's look at the fill. Hover fill, not hover fill, just fill. Come here. Where is it? So here's the RGBA value. Copy. Let's go into app. Let's do, actually, you know what? Let's not do that. Let's do fill equals, we'll do color dot purple. Okay, so now we have our fill, we have our border radius, we're going to set that to 0. What else did we change in this file? Let's see. We did, I think we did hover, I think it was the go back in. I always forget. So setting up this file is about as tedious as setting anything up the first time. But the benefit is once you spend the time in here and you get your corporate standards and styles done, it's just consumable again and again and again and again. So it's so much easier. So we got this here. What else did we set? We set the border radius, but we also set the border to 0. So the actual, I don't really need to worry about the actual. I just need to come up with some name that I can refer to. So let's just do border thickness 0. Hover fill color dot be beige, hover text dot, whoop, okay. So there we go. We've got that in there. I think this is all well and good. Let's go ahead and save this off. Actually, we don't have to save it, but we can save it to the computer. Let's download this. All right, so we've got another file. Let's go into the directory. Actually, let me get rid of this. Let me get rid of this. Let's go do this one more time. This computer, download. Okay, we've got the one file. Let's get rid of this. This time we're going to unpack. Nope, we're going to unpack. Okay. So now that we've unpacked, we're going to go into source. All right. This is where I told you now we can access the onStart. So if we pull up the YAML, everything that you just saw me write is now accessible here. So if I want to start now creating new variables on this, right, I can actually go ahead and change. I can go ahead and change this information in here, and I can start creating more and more variables as I move through things, right? So I have a group called button default, but what if I did the date picker, right? So then I will just come down here and do date picker, and then finish that out, right? And then start adding into this all of the different values that I need, right? But I'm not going to do that in this video, but I just wanted to show you that now I have access to the file offline, and I would just go ahead and use it. The negative is I don't have the IntelliSense, but I do have the ability to go ahead and create all this stuff. So now in my themes.json, let's go ahead and change out these properties to button defaults, and we're going to do .fill. So let's look at fill. Let's go back into, these are all of the buttons. So button fill. This time I am going to override it very specifically because I want the particular buttons to be accessible in the variable list. So I'm going to do button.defaults.fill. And I believe that matches case and everything. I don't know that it is or isn't case sensitive, but I'm not going to take the chance. I'm essentially just going to set it the way that I know that it should work. So if it's the exact, I shouldn't have any problems at all. So we're going to do all these radiuses. We're going to change it out to button.defaults.border radius. So we're going to change that out there, and I'm going to copy this entire string, and we're going to change this out to here, and here, and here. Okay, so now we have our hover colors and things of that nature, border thickness. So we should be able to do border thickness, change that out there. And now we have the hover items. Hover color, hover fill, hover color, hover fill, and this is going to be hover fill and hover text. Dot hover fill dot hover text. Okay, so that's this one right here. Okay, so we're going to close this. I don't need to save that, but this one I need to save. All right, so this is saved. Let's come back over and repackage everything up. Okay, so everything's packed up again. Come back over here, 11:45. That matches this timestamp, so that should be good. Now watch what happens when we choose open, and we want to open it from the local, and we don't want to save what's up there. And so now we got an error. So what's the error? Hover color border thickness dot hover text. So it doesn't see that there. Okay. I think I know why. So I screwed up, which is good because now you get to see the different message. Let's see here, confirm exit message. I want to, where am I going? On start. I need var global in front of all of that. So let me go back into my file here. Let's start from the top. Fill var global. So anything that has button defaults, I've got a prefix. Actually, this is a problem. I'm going to change this out. That needs to come out, period. Copy. Sorry guys, it's like watching paint dry, but it is the exact monotonous stuff that you're going to do as well. All right, I think we're good. Save that. Pack it up one more time. Go back to my Power App. File, open, browse. All right, so we now have a purple button. The hover color, hover fill color doesn't seem to be working. So let's look at the properties of that. So let's go into the error, get help message. So it's essentially complaining that the variable that I've specified is not right. So if we go into the on start again, so border thickness, it is border thickness. Button defaults, border thickness. Border thickness. Border thickness. I'm going to open it up in here just so that I don't have to keep fighting it. Button defaults, border thickness. hover fill. Why am I doing hover thickness? It should be the fill. It should be a color. What am I doing? I am all spun around. Let's see here. Alright guys, so I went ahead and I fixed the file here rather than you guys watch me stumbling over my own feet and being cross-eyed about everything. Essentially what I did is I went ahead and I updated, I got all spun around and I wasn't looking where I was at. So in any event, I fixed all of the stuff, I repackaged the file, and now I'm getting ready to upload it again. And I verified that it works inside of here. So let's do File, Open, Browse, from the file, Save. No, don't save. We don't want to save what we've been working on. So we're pulling it in, and now the button has all of the correct properties. All right, so this is now well and done. Every single button that I go ahead and add to the screen, it all has the same look and the feel. Now, I can go into the application on start properties now that it's accessible through here, and I don't have to decompile, recompile the app, but I can because now I've set them as configurable variables. I can do the go into the change the on start, and if I don't want to do dot purple, I want to do dot, I don't know, what's a decent blue violet. I don't know what that color is. All right, so we've changed it to blue violet, and you might be thinking, hey, why didn't this change? It's because we have to rerun the on start, and now we get that much more vibrant, violent, whatever. And so as a result of that, all my new buttons now come and pick up with that. So this is a much better, cleaner way of doing all of the different controls so that we can use the software the way that Microsoft intended us to use the software. Hopefully, they will build into this home and the theme a whole nother button that allows us to do custom and go ahead and build and flesh out all of the details that's in here. But as you can see, it's something that seems, you know, trivial on a request, but when you look and see what's behind it, it's a tremendous amount of work. So until Microsoft releases this, and if I had to guess, probably low priority for them, which means a lot of high dollar value in a negative way for your company when you're copying and pasting and having developers do the techniques that I showed you earlier. So follow this technique. Hopefully this made a lot of sense to you. Hopefully you got a lot of value out of it. And now all your controls can pick up corporate style standards from font sizes to the colors to the borders to all of the little minuscule details that take developers forever and 5 days to tweak and make sure. And with all of this being said, it's one less thing that QA then has to put some visual eyes on to make sure that there's consistency through and through the application because the controls are already bound to and adhere to the corporate standards. So again, that's it for this video. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.